What's up, guys? Welcome back to another episode of the Push the Tempo podcast. It's been a minute. Um, we just been really busy with real life stuff. But we're back now. That's all that matters. And with yesterday's Game Seven, Clippers and Mavericks, the first round is officially over. So we figured we'd just run through all the first round series and just give our opinions and just give our thoughts on each of the series. So why don't we start with the Atlanta Hawks and New York Knicks? The Atlanta Hawks won the series in 5 games. In my opinion, it was one of the more interesting series, and it was one of the more fun series because of the atmosphere, not only in Madison Square Garden, but also in, I believe, the State Farm Arena is what it's called. But it was a really fun series. So I'll just throw it over to you. What did you think about it?
Honestly, it's one of those series that I regretted not watching the whole thing. And I know it was a 4-1 series, but honestly, looking closer at the matchups and how intense it really got in both those arenas, it was definitely a high playoff intensity games, as you could tell. The whole hating on Trey Young, the villain Trey Young, and then also Julius Randle leading his team. I don't know. I thought it was a pretty good series, and I just kind of wish I watched a little bit more of it. You know what I mean?
Man, it was a really good series, man. This was, in my opinion, the best series of the first round. Well, it was until like it started kind of getting away from the Knicks because uh, some of their some of their flaws that they were able to gloss over in the regular season started showing. Because in the regular season they were a really really good defensive team, but they weren't really good offensively. And um, as great as Julius Randle was in the regular season, the shot diet that he lived on, difficult twos like long twos, off the dribble, turnaround, and all that. Like unless you're like an absolutely elite player, like you're gonna struggle with those kind of shots. And he really did struggle. He shot only 29% from the field in the playoffs. Uh, really, he and Derrick Rose ended up being the best player on the Knicks in terms of like scoring and facilitating. And when Derrick Rose is your best player, like Derrick Rose had a great series, but when he's your best player, you're gonna struggle. You know what I mean? He didn't. Julius Randle didn't really get to the rim a lot. Clint Capella, I thought, played a really good series defensively. He really made it difficult for Randle to when he got to the rim, so that's why kept settling for those twos. And Trey Young made me eat my words, man. He's really really good. I always like recognize how great of a passer he is. That's one of the things about his game that even when I didn't enjoy watching him, it's something that I always found very impressive. But yeah, he's really good, man, and he had a really good series, not only scoring but also facilitating the ball. I think him and Kareem are the only two players to ever score more than 30 points in their first 4 road games in a playoff series. So that's very impressive, and he really did his thing in this series.
Yeah, 100%. And just kind of going off that, I learned two things from this series. One is Trey Young is amazing. He's not a lot of people are hating on him early in the season. The whole Steve Nash thing, him trying to draw those fouls or whatever. I mean, yeah, that is what he does sometimes, and it's part of the game. But other than that, he has so much skill, and you can really tell like he's gonna be a generational player. And I'm not saying he's gonna be the best player ever, but you can really tell he's gonna be like a top 5, 6, 7 point guard for the rest of his career. And then the other thing I learned is the Knicks, although I had them winning the series and they lost, you're completely right. I agree. Like they were taking really difficult shots, and it really starts with Julius Randle. And I thought he could lead the team and overcome the Hawks, especially because the Hawks aren't that great defensively. But at the end of the day, one thing that I learned is the Knicks. Honestly, they're one piece away from being a great team, like one really good piece away. You know what I mean? Like Randall proved that he can't be a number one option in the series. You know what I mean?
Right. I had the Hawks winning in six before the playoffs started. I just figured, like, if you look at the Hawks roster, it's it's silently like really really good, or like they're rotating the guys who are in their rotation. Like you obviously have Trey Young, Bogdanovich hit some big shots in this series, and he was really good as well. John Collins, he didn't have the greatest of series, but we know how good he is, just like as a player. Clint Capella, like I said earlier, he made it very difficult for Julius Randle. DeAndre Hunter, before he got hurt during the season, I thought he was in the running for most improved player. He's like just a really, really good role player. He can defend, he can shoot, he can. This year, he started creating off the dribble a bit more. If they even get anything from Danilo Gallinari, that's considered a win. Like he stunk the first round. Lou Williams, I mean, what can you say? Off the bench, inefficient scorer, but If you can cover for him, good. Kevin Herter can kind of create off the dribble and play make a bit, but he's also a good shooter. Like they have some good players in their rotation, and the Knicks, as great as they are defensively, uh, there was some questionable coaching decisions, I'd say, by Tom Thibodeau. You didn't really play Emmanuel quickly enough, I'd say. You should have played him a bit more, particularly when you were lacking the scoring punch. Alec Burks was really good in game one. He didn't really do much the rest of the series, and it just really just came down to the fact that the best players on the Knicks ended up being Derrick Rose and Julius Randle, and Julius Randle really struggled. And the best players on the Hawks, Trey Young, and I'd probably say Clint Capella or Bogdanovich was second. I lean Clint Capella because of the work he did defensively, but they were able to get theirs a lot easier. So yeah, that's just my final opinions on that series.
No, I totally agree with you. Yeah, it was one of those series that I feel like it could have been a lot better if they played more games, but came down to 4-1 series. You want to move on to the next one?
Sure. I'll let you start with this one. What was your opinion on the 5 game series between the Boston Celtics and the Brooklyn Nets?
Man, I'm starting to lose faith in the Celtics. At the beginning of the season, I had them. Obviously as a Celtics fan, I had them. Getting far in the playoffs, and right now, one thing that really stood out is how bad the Celtics are internally and how good the Nets really are as a team. I mean, like if you look at the Nets in a whole, I mean, you got KD, Harden, Kyrie. You always think about that trio is nice and all, but like I gotta see a lot of the supporting cast really play. Like Bruce Brown, he's a guy that's kind of very low key, but he played really well. Like he was always getting in the paint, getting rebounds, defending, getting in the middle, passing out or kicking it up. And on top of that, they had Claxton, who was Loki. He was surprisingly good. Like he was a lob threat. He was a very strong rebounder, defender. He got some nice block shots. And then of course we got Joe Harris, the reigning 3-point champion. Did he win this year or last year? Last year, right?
Yeah, last year.
Yeah, last year. I mean, this dude did not miss a shot. And it was just like it was so painful just watching it because this entire series it felt like the Celtics were behind, but like in still striking position. And then in the last quarter they just get blown out. And that's what it felt like the whole series. It just felt like we were chasing greatness. There was no way to stop these guys. If Kyrie got cold, you always had Katie and Harden. And it was just like basically the theme of the entire series. We really didn't stand a chance, especially because Kemba Walker is garbage. I mean, dude averaged 13 points in the playoff series. Like, how are you going to get paid that much to average 13 points? I mean, you let Marcus Smart, a guy that's not even known for his offense, score 18, 19 points per game in this series, and you can't even score 13. But that's my rant on Kemba Walker. I'm kind of getting off topic here, but you could tell like there's a huge difference in skill here. And on top of that, you got to remember that the Nets aren't even fully healthy. They didn't even play DeAndre DeAndre Jordan. I mean, maybe because of matchups. And then on top of that, Spencer Dinwiddie's still hurt. So like this Nets team is so good. Like I really don't know what to say. And that's why I have them winning the championship, just kind of seeing the way that they're playing. And I know we're only talking about the first round, so I'm not gonna be talking about what's happening so far in the second round with Harden being hurt. But this Nets team just looks unstoppable to me.
Right. Like you said, the Celtics just in terms of not only because they just don't have the top tier talent that Brooklyn does. I mean, really no team in the league has 3 guys as good as in totality as the Nets do. But it just showed that like even with Jalen Brown, I don't think the Celtics would have won more than 1 or 2 games. Um, I just want to get what's your opinions on Evan Fournier this series? I thought he was pretty solid. I think he's a guy that the Celtics should definitely bring back as like a guy who can stabilize the second unit. If you need to pull all your like scorers from the starting lineup off the floor, he can still run some offense to get the second unit. I just figured I'd ask you what you think about him.
Yeah, no, I like Evan Fournier. In the beginning, he really struggled with the Celtics, and you can kind of see throughout the series, he really doesn't have that much of a fit on the Celtics yet. I think after one more regular season, he should fit a lot better. And like you mentioned, if he would be on that second unit as opposed to the first, he would be definitely a lot better of a fit. Again, he averaged around 13, 14 points per game, which is still better than Kemba, by the way. He was shooting it quite well. One thing that I did notice is he was getting straight up abused by Harden. Like we've all seen that clip of him getting crossed out by Kyrie and him falling down. but Harden abused them way more. Like Harden was drawing fouls on him like crazy, and that's one thing that I noticed is although he's a great offensive player, he does make a lot of reaching calls and bad foul calls. So that's one thing to be kind of wary about Evan Fournier. But I would definitely like him back on the Celtics on the second unit. But yeah, no, I definitely like him as a player. He, if it wasn't for him, honestly, I don't think that we would have won that one game because he did make some great threes. And yeah, no, I definitely like him.
Yeah, the Celtics got a lot of they got a lot of question marks to answer, or a lot of questions to answer, I should say. Really, the only two players I'd say on the roster that are untouchable are Jason Tatum and Jalen Brown. If you get the right price or right trade offer for Jalen Brown, I think you'd think about it. But Jason Tatum, the only player that I'd trade Jason Tatum for, or the only two I'd say are like Giannis, or like in that age range, I should say, because obviously he's not LeBron or Kawhi or KD or Harden. But in that age range, the only two players I trade Jason Tatum for are like Giannis and Luca. Um, but yeah, the Celtics, they just recently, Danny Ainge recently stepped down, and Brad Stevens took over as the president of basketball operations. And the first two names that were linked to the Celtics were like Lloyd Pierce and Jason Kidd. So that's not a great start, I'd say. But we got to see what the Celtics do moving forward because they have a lot of questions to answer in the
Yeah,
offseason.
no, I got a lot to talk about on that, but we'll definitely see that for the future video or
All right,
another podcast. So, by the way, guys, follow our podcast. We're gonna definitely do a video on that. You feel? But yeah, you want to hop into the next one?
sure. So the Milwaukee Bucks and the Miami Heat series, uh, this was the only sweep of the first round. Milwaukee, the first game was really good and it was really close. Milwaukee ended up winning in a game that Miami, I believe they hit 23s, and Milwaukee shot really bad from three in that game. Yeah, Miami hit 23s and Milwaukee hit five. So they ended up pulling out that game, and after that, the series was not close at all. The rest of the games were blowouts. My opinion on this series is that I don't want to say I saw this coming, but if you watch the Bucks at all this year, you would know that they're a lot better than they were last year. And if you watch the Miami Heat at all this year, you would know that they're not the same team they were last year. Like we talked about it before, that they never were able to fill the Jay Crowder spot. They got Trevor Ariza, and Trevor Ariza is good, but he's not really the player that Jay Crowder is. He's a lot older now. Their guard play just was not the same as it was last year. Tyler Hero took a massive step back. Goran Dragic was not the same player. Kendrick Nunn at points was like their only guard who was really giving them anything. Duncan Robinson, as good of a shooter as he is, he can be exploited defensively. And I just think the Bucks came in and they took care of business. The Bucks are really, really good. Giannis may not have had like the dominant scoring series in this series, but he did everything else. He was great defensively. He was really, really good rebounding, and he did his thing. And Middleton and Holiday, I think the Bucks are for real this year. I think they can make a really deep run. What do you think about the series?
So yeah, like you mentioned before, it was pretty much a sweep, and Butler and pretty much no one else on the Heat really showed up, except a few with the Kendrick Nunn being here and there. But honestly, one thing that I noticed is the Heat are really designed to kind of stop Giannis, and they did hold him under his scoring average. But the thing that stood out this year that they didn't have last year is all the help Giannis has this year. So of course, DiVincenzo got hurt, but other than that, Drew Holiday was huge. He was a huge pickup this season for them. He was scoring where there was no scoring last year. On top of that, he's a great defender. And then we've always got Middleton, who's been there, and Middleton can score, and he's probably the most clutch on the entire Bucks team. And then Brooke Lopez played well as well. So it was pretty much everyone contributing this year as compared to last year. And one thing that I really noticed is, Giannis isn't that guy in the fourth quarter or in clutch time. In that first game in overtime, this is the one that I really watched. Giannis had, I believe he had 2 points, 2 rebounds, and like 2 turnovers. That was pretty much it. Or not even those 2 points. I don't even think he did anything. He even had a free throw violation. So when it comes close to that, he really can't do too much, in my opinion, at the very least. But because he has guys like Drew Holiday and guys like Middleton that are scoring and playmaking and cutting and shooting and doing all those type of things, I think that the Bucks definitely have a good chance to have a deep playoff run. But yeah, that's one thing that really stood out to me is how ineffective Giannis can really be in a close game. just because of the way he's built as a player. You know what I mean?
I mean, I don't know if I agree with that. I'd say that just because he isn't scoring doesn't mean he isn't affecting the game in other ways. Like I mentioned, he didn't really have like a dominant series in terms of scoring, but defensively, him taking the challenge, guarding Jimmy Butler, and really making like this was the worst playoff series of Jimmy Butler's career. Of him being like a star level player. This is probably the worst Jimmy Butler's ever played in a playoff series. He got outscored by Bryn Forbes. I'm pretty sure everybody's seen that. Bryn Forbes outscored him, and he did really well rebounding as well. I thought Giannis was really good in this series. One thing that did stick out to me though is on Miami's side is that Bam Adebayo, like I just mentioned, Jimmy wasn't that good, but Bam outside of the last game, I didn't really think he was that great on offense. And there were plays where the person defending him, whether it be Bobby Portis or Brooke Lopez, they would play off of him a little bit. They would give him space in the mid range where he's improved his mid range shot this year. That's something he added to his game. But he just wouldn't look to shoot the ball as much. A lot of times he would be looking to do a handoff or find somebody else. So they kind of, in the Bucks game plan, they kind of use that against him where they would make him either him beat them or nobody because they would freeze out everybody else and say, "Hey, you can go ahead and shoot." And he just didn't really look to be aggressive enough, in my opinion. And that's something that I think he should definitely come into next season with is just a bit more aggression in his game. Yeah, and I just don't think Miami is the same team. They're not what they were last year. Like far from it. They got some question marks in this offseason as well.
Yeah, 100%, especially with the loss of Victor Oladipo. I mean, did they mess up? Probably. I really don't see too much hype and too much emphasis going into their team next year. I mean, I love Butler. He's probably one of my favorite players, but like you mentioned before, there really isn't too much to look forward to. Hopefully they bounce back. That bubble effect, you feel me? Tyler Hero really ain't the same anymore, which is unfortunate because he took on my team last year, and then to see him only score about 7 points per game in the playoff series, it's frustrating, especially probably as a Heat fan. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, for sure. I wouldn't say their bubble run was a fluke. It's definitely situational. They they matched up really well with the Bucks last year because, like you said, Drew Holiday is just such a massive upgrade over Eric Bledsoe. That Eric Bledsoe last year was not only was he not like a neutral player, he was a clear negative, where Holiday is a clear positive on the court, and he had a really good series as well. He led the Bucks in assists, but yeah, they got a lot of voids to fill in the offseason. It remains to be seen what they do with Victor Oladipo. I'd assume that he comes back, but I don't know if he's going to get the contract he was looking for. But yeah, they got a lot of stuff to figure out.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. You want to hop into the next team, the next series?
Sure. So the next series then was the Washington Wizards, losing in 5 games to the Philadelphia 76ers, the 1 seed. Um, this series, it was one that I figured would not be that competitive, and lo and behold, the Wizards won 1 game. A lot of the series, for the most part, was not close. Games 1 and 4 were close, and then the rest of them weren't really close to be. And game 4 was interesting because the hack of Ben Simmons strategy was used, which ended up helping Washington pull away at the end. Um, this series started off with showing that one of Washington's biggest weaknesses was that they don't really have a guy to defend the wing players. Like Rui Hachimura is good, but Tobias Harris was just killing him at the beginning of the series, and he started off really hot. He finished the series averaging 25. Um, and on the Wizards side, Russell Westbrook, I think he had like one good game. Outside of that, he kind of struggled because in the play-in game that he played versus Indiana, he was able to like push around Domantas Sabonis, and you're not doing that to Joel Embiid. You know what I mean? So I just want to get your thoughts. But this is a series that going in, I didn't think would be very competitive, and turned out that it wasn't really at all.
Yeah, 100%. I definitely thought this series, and I put this in my prediction, was going to be a sweep. Unfortunately, I think because Joel Embiid got hurt in that last game, that's one of the reasons why the Wizards ended up winning that one game. But yeah, I definitely didn't think that this series was going to be anything too deep. And one thing that really stood out to me was All right, first of all, Daniel Gafford is nice. He's nice with it, yo. I think he's definitely going to be a future prospect. Other than that, I didn't really see too much from the Wizards. Even Bradley Beal wasn't having a great series. Westbrook, as we mentioned, in terms of efficiency, had a horrible series. I believe he shot like around 30% or something like that. Yeah, he was doing his usual ball dominance where he's getting rebounds and assists and things like that. But I mean, at the end of the day, it really wasn't too much, and it wasn't really impressive in terms of the Wizards. One thing that was impressive is that they did make the playoffs, so I'll give them that. But other than that, I really don't see too much from the Wizards in terms of future potential. And this series in general really didn't show too much of the other guys. Rui Hachimura hit one clutch shot, and other than that, I didn't really see too much potential from other guys outside of Daniel Gafford. But yeah, honestly, this series was only interesting because I like the tactic, as you mentioned before, hack of Ben Simmons. And honestly, that's something that might happen in the future too, especially because that's the one thing that happened. And I know we're only talking about the first series, but other teams are going to take notes. And the Hawks also did this in a very close game against the Sixers, right? So that's one thing that really popped up. But other than that, like you said before, it wasn't that too much of an interesting series.
I definitely agree on the Daniel Gafford point. I think his addition to Washington, uh, it really, in some ways, it changed their season. He was really, really good for them during the regular season. He has some stuff to clean up defensively, but other than that, man, like he gives Washington a guy who can roll to the rim really hard. He's hyper athletic, and I don't want to say, but Russ has a connection usually, like a really good chemistry with his big men. Whether it be like he got Steven Adams paid $100 million. He made Ennis Cantor look really good, and Cantor's solid, but you know what I mean. So, uh, I there's gonna be. I really look forward to seeing him and Russ keep playing together because they're fun to watch, man. Daniel Gafford's a fun player to watch. One thing to look out for though is it was announced that Joel Embiid has like a partial tear in his, I believe, his right meniscus. Um, that's some scary stuff. I really hope he can stay healthy. It just sucks that this guy has just continuously had to deal with injury issues throughout his entire career, and he's still playing on it. Um, I have no idea if that's the right decision to make, but we'll see. And I really hope that this is not something that really that costs him down the road because as great as he's been this year, and as good of a chance as the Sixers have to win, which I don't think they'll win, but they probably think they do. Uh, it's not really worth it if your best player, the best player your franchise has right now, is gonna go down to an injury. You know what I mean?
Yeah, 100%. And I would definitely be careful of that because who knows, that's definitely going to be a risky thing. And on top of that, I kind of want to see more from Tobias Harris and Ben Simmons, especially with Embiid. It kind of sucks. Like I know I'm jumping into the next series, but they kind of rushed Embiid back into that game one, and it's kind of concerning, especially because he's never played a full season before. You know what I mean?
Yeah. We'll see, man. I just hope he can stay healthy. Him playing on that knee is definitely something to continue to monitor, and I really hope it doesn't. But only, I mean, you can say that playing on it will only make it worse. But I just hope it's nothing too serious, and I hope he can stay relatively healthy.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. Do you want to hop into the next series?
Sure. So the next series then was the 3-6 matchup between the in the Western Conference between the Denver Nuggets and the Portland Trailblazers. The Nuggets won in 6 games, which before the series, you could have told me that this series would have went either way, and I would have believed you. I leaned towards the Nuggets more just because I thought that um, there really wasn't an answer for Jokic. Uh, Nurkic did a solid job, I'd say, but outside of him, like particularly when Nurkic went to the bench, like Portland's defense would just collapse. Um, and man, Dame had a great series. He was really, really good. He obviously, everybody knows about the 55-point game with, was it 12 threes or something that he made. But Portland losing this series, I would still say is a little bit of a disappointment considering like the roster and not the roster, but the injuries that the Nuggets have had to deal with. Like Austin Rivers was out of the league. He wasn't in the league at some point in this previous season, and he was starting games. He started in this entire series versus the Blazers, and he played really well. So I'd say the series is a little bit of a letdown for Portland. What do you think?
100% a letdown. I mean, I agree with you. Like, they were really relying on Austin Rivers to hit big shots. On top of that, they had a rookie, and I know he's a European player, and Facundo Campaso, he nice with it, but like, I mean, that was probably the second or third best player in that series. Other than, I mean, MPJ was kind of had some up and down games as well. Aaron Gordon, we all know he's not like we all know he's kind of overrated. Let's be honest. But other than that, if you match up the two teams in terms of talent, let's just say that Damian Lillard and Jokic match up. Maybe Jokic a little bit more. You can easily see that the Blazers have a better team, and this is probably the best team that Damian Lillard has ever had. Yet he still had another first round exit, and this is his sixth first round exit. But aside from that, one thing that really stood out to me is just how inconsistent he was in that series. I mean, we all know that 55-point game. I mean, we talked about it. And then, of course, he had some great games, but he also had some bad games. One of the games he went 1 for 10. That's some like Russell Westbrook efficiency. I mean, yeah, he did have like 10 assists and all that, but 1 for 10 is not it's not a good thing. He really had to have CJ and Norman Powell cover for him. And then in the last game, we all know in the fourth quarter, he was like 1 for 9, I believe, or something like that. He had
Yeah,
like
I
one.
think it was like 2 of 9 or 1 of 8 or something.
Yeah, it was something ridiculous that should not be coming out in an elimination game for a supposedly very clutch player. And I just think that like I don't think Lillard's a bad player at all. I just think that he has to have a different type of like a different face. I don't even know how to explain it properly, but like I just think that he has to be a little bit more consistent if he wants to be as clutch as people say. You know what I mean? Like 1 for 9 in the fourth quarter and an elimination game. I just don't think that's good.
Yeah, he definitely struggled in that game, but I wouldn't say that he's their biggest problem. I think it's clear at this point that the Nuggets need to make some change. Not the Nuggets, I'm sorry. The Blazers need to make some changes to their roster. I don't know, like people have been saying it for a long time now that Dame and CJ, they're like there's a ceiling to your team when those are your two guys, you know. And I think one of the reasons that they brought in Norman Powell in the offseason is they're probably going to keep him and try to trade CJ. So, and Norman Powell's like 6'3", and they have him playing small forward, you know. He's a shooting guard right now. Like I'd say that's his natural position considering his height. So, and in that game where Dame had 55, uh, it went to double overtime. There was some questionable, like why didn't you foul there by Utah by by Denver. I don't know why they didn't foul at the end of regulation and at the end of overtime. It didn't make much sense to me why they just let Dame continue to hit insane shots against them. Um, but like nobody else besides the Cantor putback, nobody else but Dame scored in the two overtimes. It was I think he scored I think it's like he scored like 18 of their 20 points. The rest of the team combined to shoot like 1 for 12 or 1 for 19 in those two periods. Like what more can you ask of him at that point? You know what I mean? CJ was stepping out of bounds in overtime. I don't know how many dunks Robert Covington can possibly miss, but apparently it's all of them because he did nothing. Um, they need to make some changes, and I think they will. We saw that they fired their coach, Terry Stotts. Uh, he didn't really like after a lot of time. He just lost a lot of his offensive creativity. There wasn't a lot of plays that Portland run. Like you would think, as great of a shooter as Dame is, that they would involve him in like off ball actions to like just conserve his energy, where he doesn't have to like create a shot every single time down the court. But you didn't really see that often, and like they just didn't have a lot going besides Damian Lillard creating like basically their whole offense. And when he was off the floor, they tanked. When Nurkic was off the floor, their defense tanked. So there's a lot of changes also coming, similar to Miami, and I don't know who else we were talking about earlier, but similar to those guys. Like I think there's going to be some changes in Portland this offseason.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I know I was ragging on Dame Lillard, but I definitely don't think he was the problem either. I just think that he's not as talented as people make him out to seem, which obviously isn't his fault. I really just think that the Blazers isn't as good as everyone thinks that they are, even though, like I said before, this is probably the best team that they've ever had. I definitely do think that the Blazers should shake it up. You know what I mean? Like, and as we mentioned before, Terry Stotts isn't like the greatest coach ever. He did lose some offensive creativity. Sometimes I'll be watching Blazers games and it just feels like CJ and Dame take turns, with the Rock, and then they just do whatever they want to do, and that's what it really does feel like. So I definitely agree with you there.
And just quick shout out to Monte Morris and Austin Rivers. Austin Rivers was huge. I believe it was like game four where he had like 18 points in the fourth quarter or something to close him out. Or it was one of the games that they won. I don't know if off the top of my head, but he played a really good game. Shout out to him. Shout out to Monte Morris, who as a backup point guard is one of the best backup point guards in the league, but he was just thrust into a starting role and averaged 15 points. I think he scored 25 points in that double overtime game. So he really stepped up when they needed him to. They played those guys, man. Denver has a really good team, and with the way the West playoffs have shaken out so far, if they were fully healthy, like I think they're a team that has like a very strong case that they could make it out of the West this year. But sadly, they just been wrecked by injuries, unfortunately.
Yeah, no, it definitely sucks. I mean, two of their starters, Barton and Jamal Murray, man, it's definitely a tough blow. But yeah, I mean, MVP Jokic, you feel me? You on that train or not?
Yeah, oh yeah, of course, man. Jokic was insane. There's really not much you can do to stop him. Like he's probably him and Luca are the two toughest singular covers in the West right now, in my opinion. They're just insane.
Definitely, definitely. Do you want to hop into the next series?
Sure. So the next series then is the Utah Jazz, number one seed Utah Jazz versus the 8th seed Memphis Grizzlies. So game one was a surprise, I should say. People saw it. People didn't see the Jazz. I'm sorry, yeah, the Jazz losing. So the Jazz lost game one by three. But the context is in that game that the Jazz are one of the best 3 point shooting teams in the league. In this game, they didn't really shoot that well, and Memphis ended up winning the game. And people overreacted, said that maybe the Jazz can lose the series, blah blah blah, and then the Jazz won four straight. Um, None of those games being particularly close. I mean, game four was, but the Jazz ended up going on like a run in the last couple minutes and closed that one out. What's your opinion on this series? What did you think?
I mean, I think it, like, of course, the first game, Spada didn't play, Donovan Mitchell and everything like that. And then as soon as he came back, he was on fire. I like Donovan Mitchell as a player. There's a little bit of a backstory, but I remember watching the summer league game. As I said before, I'm a Celtics fan, so it was the Jazz versus Celtics, and um, Mitchell crossed the living crap out of Tatum, made him fall, and hit a tough shot. And ever since then, I've been a fan. I still think that Mitchell is a great leader, but this is something that I've been saying for the longest time ever. Sometimes if the leader doesn't play well, then none of the rest of the team really does. And the Jazz are a team that has a lot of like passing and teamwork and things like that. So when their leader, I guess, as you can say, Mitchell, doesn't perform, they can still play really well. And that's one thing that really popped up in this series. When they don't play well is when they're going to struggle. And I think there's a possibility that might happen in the future rounds. But in this series, I definitely think that they cemented their teamwork, and their shooting wasn't as great as the regular season, but I still think that they'll be fine. I'm still not a fan of the Jazz, and I still don't think that they're gonna go too far this year. But I definitely think that they still have a little bit of potential and possibility. You know what I mean?
This series from the Jazz, it was a tough matchup for the Grizzlies because what the Jazz are so good at is particularly because of Gobert, he's such a good rim deterrent, and that's where the Grizzlies really make their money in terms of their scoring. I think they were the best, they scored the most points in the paint this year out of anybody in the league. And then you match up with the best rim protector in the league in the first round, and your best player, Ja Morant. Like Ja was phenomenal in this series, man. But he's his best when he's attacking the rim, and he did his best attacking the rim when Derek Favors was in the game. He could attack him instead of Gobert. Um, One guy who's really struggled in this series was Jaren Jackson Jr. Uh, I like Jaren Jackson as a player. I think he's very intriguing. He has a really interesting like skill set, but there's a lot of holes in his game that he needs to fill. Sure, he can shoot, but he fouls like a lot. He fouls more than like almost anybody in the league, and he also plays with Dylan Brooks, which is kind of funny. And Dylan Brooks had a really good series, but he's not really that great defensively. He has some lapses sometimes defensively. Um, and yet, like he's not really that great of a rebounder, and you'd want him to be better as a rebounder, unless you want to make him just like a shooting power forward. But he's got a lot of stuff he should work on. But this is a series that I thought the Jazz would win in 4 or 5, and that's what happened really.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. It was definitely pretty much a straightforward series. To kind of just bounce off what you said, the Grizzlies are definitely, I think they're the second youngest team in the NBA, so I'm not concerned about them at all. But yo, Dylan Brooks is nice with it, yo. I got a lot of respect for him now. He's a great two-way player. And as you mentioned before, like they were scoring a lot in the paint, but even the shooting, yo, Desmond Bain is a great player. So I definitely think the Grizzlies are in a good position in the future. But yeah, this series was like you said before, a straightforward series where I mean, pretty much everyone expected the Jazz to win.
The Grizzlies, they've just done a really good job in terms of team building. Like they don't have a lot of guys that when you throw them out there, you're nervous, you know. Uh, like Xavier Tillman, for example, he didn't play a lot in this series, but the thing about him is that like he hit one of the biggest shots in Memphis this season in the play-in game versus Golden State, the corner three that was later made a two, or it should have been a two. But they just have like a really solid roster that when they throw somebody out there, you're not really worried unless it's like Justice Winslow. But that's another debate. But
Yeah.
yeah, you're definitely right about Dylan Brooks, man. He had a really good series. Fouling, he fouls a lot too, which is something that he's got to fix. But he hit his free throws, 3 point shot. He takes a lot of difficult shots. Sometimes it's to your team's benefit, and sometimes it's your to their detriment. At times it was beneficial, and at times it was detrimental to them. But yeah, man, this Grizzlies team, like they have a lot of stuff to look forward to, and they're a really good team. They're fun to watch.
Yeah, I will say that one overlooked piece in their team is definitely Jonas Valanciunas.
Oh yeah,
I mean, a huge rebounder, offensive rebounder. He's a body. I definitely think he's definitely overlooked. I mean, we all know that John Morant isn't the best shooter, but sometimes he can shoot with confidence, knowing that Valanciunas is going to be there to get a putback. You know what I mean? Or after a Dylan Brooks difficult shot, he's just there to put it right back in. So, quick shout out to that guy JV. He really does put in work.
I just want to give a quick shout out to my guy Rudy Gobert. He played a really great series.
Hell no, bro. Get the
No,
hell
yeah,
out of
he
here,
did.
bro.
Yeah, no,
Garbage, bro.
man,
Garbage.
man, Rudy Gobert. Uh, Whenever he would go out of the game is when Memphis would start making a run, and when he would come back in, he would immediately stifle it. I know he doesn't. I know he gets a lot of unnecessary hate because I don't know why, but he had a really good series rebounding, obviously protecting the rim. He averaged over 3 blocks, and the blocks don't even tell the whole story. Like people are just scared to go at him really, and yeah, he played a really great series, man. And I hope he doesn't continue it next round against my team, but he was really good.
Man,
So
whatever you
with
say.
that being said, do you want to move on then to the Lakers and Suns series?
Man, I don't want to talk about Rudy Gobert no more. Yo, let's go.
All right. So this is a series that I think was the toughest one in the Western Conference first round to predict. The Suns have been legit all year. They're really good. Devin Booker is amazing. Chris Paul is amazing. They have one of the best forward rotations in the league. Mikal Bridges was having a great year. Jake Crowder is good defensively. Cam Johnson, Torrey Craig. And on the other side, you have the Lakers. You got LeBron James and Anthony Davis. The big thing for them coming into the series was were they going to be healthy enough? And unfortunately for them, that they just weren't. Anthony Davis was dealing with injuries almost the entire series. He ended up. I don't think he played game. He didn't play game 5, and then he tried playing in game 6 on a groin injury and just wasn't able to. And Devin Booker with his 47 points in an elimination game. He closed them out. And yeah, I just wanted to get what's your take on this series?
One thing I will say is I really don't want to hear too much excuses from Lakers fans. I think it's kind of apparent outside of LeBron and AD that Lakers don't really have too much of talent around them. I mean, it's just apparent to me, and I really didn't think that they had a chance to get like a deep playoff run aside from if LeBron took over. But I mean, it's father time. I mean, you can tell LeBron is getting old. He hasn't missed this many games in his career ever. So there's that. On top of that, like he hasn't played this bad ever. So there's that. And then we all know that Anthony Davis has been having a horrible season. For whatever the reason, we don't really know. I still think if he was completely healthy, I still think that the Suns would have beat them. I think that this series, one thing that's really overlooked is how good the Suns really are. I mean, Chris Paul is that leader. Devin Booker is different. I will say he's 100% different. Me and you, we talked about it. We are saying that he's like Tyler Hero, but he really proved us wrong. He's a great player, a great scorer, and he's really putting that work. I mean, now he can face double teams. You know what I mean? And then they just have these pieces that are just great compliments. I mean, we talked about Mikal Bridges can shoot and defend. Jay Crowder's another guy that can shoot and defend. He's a tough player. I mean, he's going toe to toe with LeBron, and I mean, yeah, he's not as good as LeBron, not even close, but he's definitely not backing down. And that's one thing that I can really respect. And then they have like tons of players. I mean, remember when Cameron Payne was basically out the league? I never knew that this guy became so reliable. I mean, I didn't watch regular season Suns game too often, but when I came to the playoffs, this guy was shooting and playmaking and driving. I'm like, yo, what Cameron Payne is this? I don't know this version of Cameron Payne. And it was just I could just say that for the rest of the team because these guys really did put in a lot of work. I mean, even DeAndre Ayton was doing a lot of things defensively that was so good. He was intercepting passes, he was going the right lane, he was blocking shots. You know what I mean? So I definitely think that one thing that is overlooked is how good the Suns team really is.
Yeah, man. So on the Sun side, like you're right, Cameron Payne, his his journey to becoming what he is now. A while back, he wasn't really a great player. He was out of the league for a bit, but he's really turned himself into like a valuable bench piece, a guard off the bench who can come in, play make a little bit, but mostly a scorer. He can shoot. DeAndre Ayton, man, to me, we all know how good Devin Booker is. He's a three-level scorer. He got 29 points per game in this series on good shooting. Obviously, like I mentioned earlier, 47 in the closeout game. He was phenomenal. Scored, I believe, 22 in the first quarter. But the guy who really impressed me the most in the first round for the Phoenix Suns was DeAndre Ayton. Like going into this series, I was a bit skeptical. I shouldn't say skeptical, but I was worried that like a guy like LeBron is going to live at the rim, which he ended up not doing for whatever reason. But LeBron is going to live at the rim. Anthony Davis, if he's healthy, would live at the rim, and they would just get Ayton in foul trouble. And after Ayton, like one of the reasons I had the Lakers winning in seven, if they were fully healthy, which they ended up not being, was because that outside of DeAndre Ayton, the Suns really don't have a backup center. It's like Dario Saric, Frank Kaminsky, and both of them I don't really think are very reliable. So that's one reason I had the Lakers pulling it out. But DeAndre Ayton played really, really well, man. He averaged 15 and 10, almost 16, sorry, 16 and 10. He was really good defensively, and he did everything like you want a center to do. He rolled to the rim hard, he ran the floor, he rebounded, he played good defense, and man, he really proved me wrong. He had a really great series, man. So props to him. For the Lakers, this is something that I believe, like we talked about a while back, is that their center rotation, like their biggest trump card is when they move Anthony Davis to the five. Like everybody knows that Anthony Davis, he's a center, but he plays power forward because he doesn't really want to, pick up nicks and bruises throughout the long season. But when he goes to the five is when they're at their best. And when he can't do that, when he does that, they have to play. They rely a lot on two guys to play the four position. That's Kyle Kuzma, who this year, like I know he sucked in the playoffs, but in the regular season, he had become like a solid role player, playing solid defense, attacking the boards, getting offensive rebounds. He became like solid as a role player, and Markieff Morris, who's not that good. So they relied on those two guys, and those two guys both sucked in the playoffs. And Anthony Davis wasn't healthy long enough. And the Lakers centers, Andre Drummond, Montrezl Harrell, and um, Marc Gasol. Marc Gasol is the best out of those guys, and he played. He didn't play a lot, Montrezl Harrell was getting DMPs because he's not good, and Andre Drummond. Everybody knows the word on Andre Drummond. We all know that he's not good either. Um, I believe it was Game Five that I was watching very closely, and one of the main reasons is that the Lakers lost outside of their role players not playing well was that because of the role players not being able to shoot, the Suns could just build a wall, hypothetically, in front of LeBron and just dare guys like Schroeder, Alex Caruso, Wesley Matthews. They could just dare them to shoot, and when they did and they missed, they were able to just run him out of the building. That's why they blew out the Lakers in games 5 and 6, because they could just build a wall in front of LeBron, and LeBron is great at driving to the rim, and he's great at shooting threes, or he's good at shooting threes. He doesn't really have the in between game like a guy like Kawhi Leonard or a guy like Kevin Durant does. You know what I mean? So they were able to just limit LeBron a lot, and maybe it's the ankle, who knows? But he didn't really have that great of a series to his standards, at least. And yeah, this just gets chalked up to a lost year for the Lakers, man. A lot of injuries, a lot of inconsistencies, and a lack of continuity just led them to being a first round out. And plus, the Suns are really good, man. The Suns are amazing.
Yeah, no,
Sorry,
I
I rambled a
definitely
little bit
no,
there.
no, no, you're good. I definitely agree with you. You know, the whole building the wall thing. This is something that we saw Jay Crowder do with the Heat against Giannis. So like, it's I feel like it's like a very similar to that what they were doing, the Heat were doing last year, and you know, it's just great to see that the Suns, you know, a team that hasn't been in the playoffs, well, it feels like forever doing this. You know what I mean? To like you know the defending champions and all. But yeah, I definitely think that even though this series kind of like some of the games were like huge blowouts. Like I think it was like game 5 or something like that, like 30 points, and then even the last game felt like a blowout as well. It was definitely like an interesting series to kind of see these young guys putting out work against LeBron. You know what I mean? And yo, I definitely thought it was a good series. And honestly, man, I'm gonna be honest. If you're a Lakers fan, man, I don't know what to say. Like I could kind of see this coming. You know, like us out of LeBron, who do you guys really have? Like who's that third best player? Kyle Kuzma. You
It
know what I
was
mean?
supposed to be Shooter. Shooter was terrible like the last 3 games. He did nothing the last 3 games.
Exactly, yeah. And didn't he ask for like an extension earlier this year, like a huge
Yeah,
extension?
no, he turned down like a 4 years, $80 million extension, which I mean, right now looks bad, but who knows? I doubt he gets paid that, but you
Yeah,
don't know, you never know.
yeah,
And
exactly,
I
exactly.
just want to give like one quick shout. Man, the Phoenix Suns arena, they get loud, man. Like those guys and Madison Square Garden to me were the two most impressive like home court advantages. Like game one, like you could see just how like electric that building was. Phoenix. It was, man, they really showed out, man. And Phoenix is a really good team, and who knows what happens in the next round. But I think they can make the finals realistically. Like I don't think it's unrealistic to say that they can make the finals.
Yeah, yeah. I know. I definitely agree. Yo, okay. I haven't. All right. So for you guys watching us, we have like our own private bracket. Yo, Kyle, who did you have winning against the Nuggets or the Suns, or did you have the Lakers winning?
So I had the Nuggets beating the Blazers, and I had the Lakers beating the Suns in seven, barring like any
Mm,
injury. So I ended up being wrong on that one.
okay,
I
okay,
probably should
whatever.
have picked the Suns, man. Honestly, I've been a huge fan of them all year, but yeah, I probably
I
missed on
see.
that one.
All right. So I picked the Suns, and I also picked them to beat the Nuggets. Who do you have between these two?
Oh, the Suns. Um,
All right, word.
I think the Suns are they just have not only more talent, but but DeAndre Ayton played well versus Jokic in the regular season. Like he held him to below his averages in terms of like efficiency and shooting percentages. And if he can stay on the court long enough versus Jokic,
Mhm.
because Jokic he's not really as jump shot dependent as Anthony Davis. Anthony Davis falls in love with his jump shot too much, in my opinion. Uh, like Jokic will force the issue, and if Aiden can stay on the floor with him, I don't think the rest of the guys on the Nuggets match up to the rest of the guys on the Suns. Like the Suns, in my opinion, just have better players at this very moment, like because of the injuries that the Nuggets have. So I picked the Suns in 5 or 6.
That's fair. I just want to know your opinion. All right. Do you want to go into the last series?
Sure.
You got one more, right?
Yep. So the series ended yesterday. Like I said, the Clippers ended up winning Game 7 in Los Angeles versus the Dallas Mavericks. This series took years off my life, man. It was a very stressful 2 weeks for me, particularly after May 25th when the Clippers went down 0-2. They went into an 0-2 deficit. Um, I'll let you give your opinion on this series before I give mine. What did you think of this series?
Honestly, I thought the Clippers were gonna win in maybe game 5 or 6. Man, man, I underestimated Luca. This guy is a beast. He was clearly the best series or the best player in the entire series. This guy Luca has so much talent. I mean, if you look at him, you can tell he's not really that athletic in terms of like most of the athletes in the NBA compared to them. But this guy was putting in so much work. Like he was able to do the right play after right play after right play. I mean, it was just really impressive. And on top of that, he was hitting difficult shots after difficult shots with the best players guarding him, with the Clippers sending in double teams and a bunch of different looks at him, defensive looks, and it was just really impressive. So one thing I will say is Luca's a freaking beast, man. On top of that, I did think the Clippers played pretty decent, but I mean, it feels like something's missing from their team. What do you think?
So I'll get to one of the points you made in a bit. So the reasons, and I watched the series the entire way. Obviously, I'm a Clippers fan. I read articles about what was going on and the reasonings that things were happening the way they were. In games 1 and 2, 538 put out an article about the Dallas Mavericks series and the Clippers series so far. And in games 1 and 2, I believe Dallas in those two games had exceeded their like 3 point expectancy, or their 3 point percentage expectancy in those two games. Like in that 2 game sample size was more than like anybody in NBA history. Tim Hardaway Jr., it felt like he could not miss in the first 2 games. I believe he was averaging 25 through 2 games. He came down to earth in a big way in the series in the last couple of games. Outside of game 6, I believe, where he scored like 20 26 or something. But in the first 2 games, really, Dallas's role players were playing out of their minds, and the Clippers role players until really game 7. Like none of them besides Rondo for 2 games showed up for the most part. Patrick Beverly, after I believe game 2, ended up getting benched, and he has barely played in this entire series just because he's not good enough. He doesn't not good enough. I shouldn't say that, but he doesn't have the size defensively, and he continuously like helps too much defensively on Luca. And the thing about Luka Doncic is he's phenomenal. And with the best players, what you do is you take away one thing from them. Luka is an amazing scorer and he's an amazing playmaker. So what the Clippers should have done the entire series is make him beat them, make him score like 50 plus each game to win. Because if you take him and you let him do whatever he wants and freeze out everybody else, you should still end up winning theoretically, right? But what the Clippers' problem was is that a lot of the times they would allow him to not only score but allow him to facilitate and get his teammates involved as well. And that's what was happening in games 1 and 2, is that he was getting his points and he was getting his teammates involved. And the Jalen Brunsons, the Maxi Klebers, the Tim Hardaway Juniors of the world were playing amazing in those first 2 games. Um, the next 2 games in Dallas, the Clippers they made it a point of emphasis to attack the rim. Everybody knows that the Clippers went down 30-11 in game 3. I thought the series was over right there. I was really down, but the Clippers, they made an adjustment in the second half of game 3, is where they ran out a lineup of I believe it was Rondo, Kawhi, Paul George, Marcus Morris, and Nick Batum, and that was their starting lineup going forward. Reggie Jackson was starting, but that lineup, it allows them to switch everything better and doesn't allow Luca to like attack like a complete mismatch every single time. So that's what they did in game 4. They blew out Dallas in game 4, and game 5, Dallas, the Clippers played really bad, turned the ball over, particularly in the third quarter. It was not great. And Luca again, he scored 42, and I think he had 14 assists. He played again. They just let him do whatever he wanted. Game 6, Kawhi Leonard masterclass, 45 points. He did everything, man. He carried the Clippers in that game. In a game where they got 4 bench points, and Kawhi, Paul George, and Reggie Jackson are the only guys who scored, I believe, in like double figures in that game for the Clippers. And game 7 yesterday, man, again, Kawhi Leonard did his thing. But in this game, in game 7, is finally where the role players for the Clippers showed up. Marcus Morris had a huge game. Terrence Mann was really, really good. Luke Kennard was amazing. Kawhi, Paul George, they did their thing. And on Dallas' side, they didn't really have any role players show up. It was really just Luca and Dorian Finney-Smith. Outside of that, Hardaway Jr. wasn't good. Porzingis wasn't good the entire series. Like Porzingis had a really, really bad series, man. Not just offensively, but the Clippers straight up were just attacking him defensively, and it's just a hard fought series. And the Clippers were able to pull it out, thankfully, because this was a tough series for me.
Facts, yo. Porzingis is a new playoff P. Have you seen that meme?
Yeah, man. Porzingis is something else, man. I didn't think he was that good to start, like in just like totality. I don't think he's that good of a player, but
Yeah, there's so many memes on him. Somebody said he was like the Kyle Kuzma, like a 7'3" Kyle Kuzma.
he's a 7'3" shooting guard who doesn't. Yeah, he's a 7'3" shooting guard. Like he there was a matchup, I believe it was in game 4, where he had Reggie Jackson on him in like the high post, and he didn't attack. Like he didn't try to get to the rim. He shot like a fadeaway over Reggie Jackson. Like Reggie Jackson is one of the worst defenders in the league. Like, are you?
I'm dead.
It's like it didn't make a lot of sense to me. See, so I wanna get back to you on this point. You thought Luca was the best player in this series.
Yeah.
Well, why do you think that?
I mean, he was just so dominant. I mean, if you take out Luca from his team, how do you think that the Mavs were gonna do? And then if you take out Kawhi from the Clippers, how do you think that would do? I know Kawhi had a great series. I mean, a lot of the games he really put his team on the back, but I mean, I feel like Luca did that throughout the entire series. You know what I mean?
See, the thing is that um, the reason I would lean Kawhi, and not just being biased, but Kawhi, he like Luca doesn't play much defense, like that's well known. Sure, Luca obviously put up monster numbers in this series, but he is not because like he has to. Like the Mavs, like one of their problems is that they don't really have a secondary ball handler outside of Jalen Brunson. But the heliocentric style that we've seen that Luca plays right now is similar to what James Harden did, similar to what LeBron James did, where you don't really have a second guy next to you, and it allows you to put up monster numbers. And if you look at like Luca's shooting splits by quarter, Luca got like a lot worse as the game went on. Like his fourth quarter shooting numbers, I believe he shot like 36% from the field in the fourth quarter of these games because he wasn't like he was just like worn out because he was doing so much. So and plus add on to the fact that the Clippers were like seeking him out defensively to attack him, particularly in Game 6 where Kawhi was just shooting like step back threes over him and Dorian Finney-Smith. That's why I lean Kawhi. Kawhi didn't put up obviously as many points, but he was a lot more like Kawhi shot 60% from the field in this playoff series. Like that's tough to do as anything less than like a center. He shot 42% from three and 90% at the free throw line for the like basically, and plus he was playing great defense and averaged 2.5 steals for the most part. So that's why I lean Kawhi, but I can understand anybody saying Luca. But in my opinion, I think Kawhi was the best player in the series.
No, okay. When you put it that way, I can kind of see where you're coming from. I just feel like the difference between Luca and like a James Harden per se is like Luca. You could tell like Luca was doing it because he had to, in my opinion at least. I mean, like I don't want to see like Porzingis going like 2 of 37 or something like that. So I don't know. I just feel like Luca really had to do all that, and I really want to see like I really want to see like another great player by his side. I feel like we can all see that Luca's making his teammates better, and that's another thing that I can't really say about James Harden. I mean, like when did he make like PG Tucker like the best player in the world? You know what I mean? Like this guy's making Team Hardaway Jr. look really good. He's making Maxi Kleba and all these other guys look like decent players. I mean, I have respect for all these players and all, but like I just don't feel like they would be as good on a different team. Like for example, if we take Dorian Finney-Smith and put on the Celtics, I don't think he's gonna be that good. He's gonna be like a semi Ojale. But on the Mavs, this guy is a great defender, a great spot up shooter, and all that. You know what I mean?
So I would say that see as great as Luca is, like the heliocentric style of play, it and who knows, man. Luca's still 20. He's what 22 years old. He's still very young, but as we've seen, like you need multiple guys to be able to handle the ball, uh, and getting Luca like some scoring done with him, like not having to initiate and create everything, it helps him, reserve energy. And like I said, his shooting percentages got worse by each quarter. He was really, really good in the first half of games, but as games continued on, he got worse because he just got worn out because he had to do so much. So I think they're going to make some changes in the offseason. I think that they will definitely try to look to like test the market at the very least for Porzingis, because as it looks right now, with who knows, maybe he can look better, but they got to try to get a secondary ball handler next to him. A trade that I was thinking of was for them would be like possibly CJ McCollum. Like I know that he's not like an all-star level player, but he's still a guy who can handle the ball, do some scoring, like has like some shot creation ability by himself. So maybe he's a buy low guy you can look at if Portland is looking to make some moves as well. Um, Obviously the big ones for them are like um, Bradley Beal. If you can try to get him, throw all your picks that you have left and Porzingis at the Wizards and try to get Beal, but who knows? But I think there's some changes coming in Dallas as well.
Yeah, definitely. I don't think that they're a bad team. I just feel like they can get a lot better. You know what I mean? But
Oh yeah,
yeah,
for sure.
yeah. With that being said, you want to just call it for this week's episode?
Yeah, for sure. Why don't you take us out?
Oh man, I hadn't done this in a minute, bro. Hold up. All right, yo, I appreciate all you guys for listening. This is a Push the Tempo podcast. It's me, your boy Aray, and I'm with my guy Kyle. You guys can check us out on YouTube. We're on pretty much every podcast platform with Push the Tempo as our name. Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, pretty much anywhere. So yeah, with that, appreciate you guys, and we'll catch you guys in another podcast.